Esta mañana hemos visto el caso italiano y francés y ahora nos vamos a centrar en el tema de la formación en Reino Unido y el apoyo a los jóvenes talentos. Para hablar del tema tenemos una pareja de lujo, Yesenia San Juan y Sarah Mower. Yesenia es directora del Departamento de Relaciones Internacionales en la Universidad de Artes de Londres. Cuenta con más de 15 años de experiencia en el ámbito de la educación y el desarrollo de negocio. Ha dirigido proyectos de empleabilidad para la Diana Princess of Wales Memorial Fund o proyectos europeos relacionados con los derechos de los trabajadores. Actualmente, desde su cargo en la Universidad de Artes de Londres, desarrolla proyectos de colaboración entre instituciones de enseñanza y empresas internacionales vinculadas con la creatividad. Sarah Mower es periodista de moda en Vogue USA y gran defensora de los jóvenes diseñadores. Actualmente es también embajadora del programa de talentos emergentes del British Fashion Council y presidenta del comité New Generation, que reúne a los mejores diseñadores británicos durante la Semana de la Moda de Londres, como Christopher Kane, Anderson o Simone Rocha. Sarah Mower es comisaria de la Fundación Educativa del British Fashion Council, que tiene como objetivo recaudar fondos para la creación de becas relacionadas con la industria de la moda en todas sus áreas de desarrollo. Muchas gracias a los dos. Les dejo paso.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the afternoon today. Very exciting to be with you. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's such a pleasure to have you here with me.
Well, thank you so much. It's really a thrill for me to be here. Thank you, ACME, and thank you to the Spanish government and to the European Union for sponsoring this. I'm really thrilled to be here. It's actually the second time I've been to Madrid. The first time was with a British designer called Jonathan Anderson, who brought the press here to launch Loewe with an amazing exhibition and the craft prize. So I'm thrilled to be back.
Fantastic, lovely. And the sun is shining, so it's all perfect for us Brits. There's been a brief introduction about the French and the Italian ecosystems, and I just thought I'll mention that the UK fashion industry is worth £26 billion, and it employs under 1 million people. This is according to the British Council, and it is the largest of the creative industry sectors. I think it's really important as well to remind ourselves that traditionally the British fashion has been perceived as an expression of transgression and cultural expression, and how sometimes the underground can become mainstream. And I was thinking about Vivienne Westwood particularly. But also as well, it has been an example of how tradition and craft can be maintained and cared for. And I'm thinking brands like Burberry, for example. So with Sarah today, we really look forward to learning more about British fashion identity and how we can balance innovation and tradition, and how, most importantly, talent can be nurtured and supported in order to generate a thriving fashion ecosystem. There we go. So I've got a few questions, but I think it would be interesting for our audience to learn a little bit more about what the British Council is and what you do.
Well, the British Fashion Council is an entity which was formed some time back in the mids of the 1980s. I mean, before Vivienne Westwood. It was an organisation of designers at that time who were probably couturiers, and they wanted to form a fashion week. So, I mean, this is actually long, even before my time. Since then, it's evolved over years organically to become the non-profit organisation which brings forward young talent and supports the ecosystem of British fashion and represents British designers to the government. It's not a government department. This is a mistake that's been made often, where people complain to us, well, you know, as if there's lots of money coming from the government. Quite the contrary.
That's really interesting, because obviously one of the things that has become quite consistent during the day is how do we support fashion entrepreneurs and talent, and we will come back to that in a minute. But I wanted to also explore what is so particular about the British fashion ecosystem. What's unique, you think?
Well, this is something that's really important. Historically, London was the underdog between the giants of Paris and Milan and New York. And I think this is why what I'm going to try to say to you about what perhaps you might learn from us is that the Spanish situation is much closer to our situation a few years ago than perhaps it would be for either of the other giants who are speaking so eloquently and magisterially today. The most important thing about the British Fashion Council, when I started to be involved, they always had a panel of journalists. I mean, I'm a journalist. This is I don't have a paid role at the British Fashion Council. I've been working pro bono for all these years. I knew from my journalistic interest, which is in finding out what's going on with youth, what they're thinking, how I can learn from them, how I can understand what they do. So I was visiting all of the designers who were in the East End, you know, living maybe not even having studios in their bedrooms, in their kitchens, whatever. And the British Fashion Council at that time was not at all connected with them. I mean, what would happen was they'd have these lovely long lunches with wine, and a PR would come in with some samples of from designers, and they'd say yes or no, depending, and it got very much no towards the end of the day, as everyone wanted to go home. And I said, this is not right. You need to go out and see speak to these young designers, because they, you know, I started to be very aware of their problems. People could have a show, maybe, but they would very quickly fail because they didn't have any support, and there were very specific problems that they had. So after a lot of years of chivying, the regime changed. There was a regime change, and it began to, British Fashion Council sort of rebooted again in a time of emergency. It was the financial crash, 2008. I mean, I really didn't want to see another generation fail because of that, because, you know, wholesalers were, you know, see them in the front rows looking like skeletons of fear because of, you know, business crashing. And they said, right, I said, look, we can't do this. So the British Fashion Council said, okay, well, you be the scout, and also I said yes, okay, and I want to chair the New Gen Committee to see what we can do. Before that, the history of New Gen is something that I think that you could adopt. Not the history, the part of the structure of it. It's been going on since 1993. This was before my time, but it was actually created for Alexander McQueen. 1993, there was a crash, a recession, not a crash, not as bad as the 2008 one, but it was a recession. And so the BOC, and it, you know, it was enlightened. I don't know who was in charge then. They, I think maybe Isabella Blow went to. It was all run by high street men, one of them, and said, "This guy's really, really talented. You have to support him. He can't produce a collection." So, very proudly, we have a history of starting New Gen with supporting McQueen. And since then, it's coming up to the 30th anniversary, which we've been looking back at. We've actually supported 330 designers in that time. People who have come out of colleges and wanted to start their own businesses, which is a very London thing. But what makes them, okay, and I'll drop some names. Kim Jones was an independent designer who, as everybody knows, is now the head of Dior, Homme and Fendi. Also Stuart Vivers, who's the creative director of Coach, and of course Jonathan Anderson, as well as the independent designers, many of them. There came a point where, yes, we realised that the light bulb moment was realising that we were not ever going to be Milan, Paris or New York. So we had to be ourselves. What do we have? What assets do we have? We have the best, and the answer was, we can be the best platform for youth fashion, promoting youth fashion in Europe. Perhaps the world, we said to each other. This seemed like a really pushing the aspirations out, because British people don't like to overstate their their ambitions. Anyway, it seemed like a fantasy. But the fact was that the fact still is that the UK is the actual centre for educating creative fashion people, and it's not just Central St Martin's. It's Westminster University, the Royal College of Art, which is MA students, which mixes all the faculties of architecture and car design, product design, city design. Colleges in Scotland, Glasgow School of Art, which is arts and crafts based. So, and most of the people, when you actually look at it, who have succeeded and stayed in the UK as fashion designers are not British-born designers. We identify, and that's something that we didn't even think about really. So we think it's kind of London design. It's London design, it's not British design. Britain is a multicultural society, and the other unique thing about the British fashion education is that the cardinal sin is to copy anybody else. You have to be yourself. You're taught to be yourself, to express yourself, to ask where you come from, what's genuine about you, and then the creativity follows that. So, as opposed to other, more commercially minded or managerial minded academic educations, probably because we haven't got we haven't got a massive brands in the UK other than Burberry and then the High Street. People didn't have necessarily the ambition to go and work for those companies. Yes, they have the ambition to go abroad, but there's been this culture of let's have a go. It's not always wise to just start up a business from nowhere at all, but that's the creative energy that is within the UK.
That's really interesting, because we learn by doing and by failing, and to have that lack of framework in a way has enabled you to be far more experimental, perhaps. How does it relate? Because obviously when we talk about fashion in the UK, we always think about London. What about the rest of the UK?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I have observed and analysed this, over my long career is how waves of, we're all at the mercy of history. We're all at the mercy of the economy, politics, finance, and rebellion against these things and society. So I feel that what's happening now it's partly because of the pandemic, and it's partly because of people being able to, for London being too expensive to live in, capitals being too expensive to live in. There's a kind of regionalisation. So designers are deciding to live and work outside London, but show in London, or show digitally, or so there are new models, and one of the amazing things, phenomena of the moment, and it's a wave, is that designers who maybe would have stayed in London, who'd studied in London, are now repatriating themselves to the countries that they come from. And I know this because I have a very good friend in the audience, Ernesto Naranjo, who I met at Central St Martin's MA 4 years ago, who is one of the Spanish designers. There's a whole wave of Spanish designers in the MA. Ernesto is now, for every good reason, located in Madrid with his own business, because you should speak for yourself. I've just been chatting to him at lunch about how it's viable to have your own business here, because it's, you have the resources of people who can make, and it's certainly less expensive than London, but it's not. There's no negative about it. It means the positive thing is being Spanish in Madrid, and I think that this is part of a pattern I've seen happen. There are designers from Seoul who are now back in Seoul. There's the designers who are between London and there's one who's between London and Sierra Leone. There's far more of a fluid pattern of living and working now. Not fluid. It's just changing in a positive way.
It's positive, yeah. That's definitely positive. I agree, because it enables exchanges of ideas. And I think the point you made earlier about business models as well, there is so much to learn in the West and in Europe, particularly about different business models that are adopted in other emerging fashion economies as well. That is really fascinating, and I'm glad we've got some alumni in the audience as well. But I wanted really you to tell us more about the success story that has been New Gen, and really share with us how it works in terms of how participants or designers are recruited and the support that they are being provided, and how the whole process works.
Is this still working? It is. Okay, so I think one of the strengths of the British Fashion Council is that we're always very self-critical. We're always asking, what could we do better? And rules have been flexed according to, and input has been flexed according to what's needed. So there's a selection committee. There's always been a selection committee made up of buyers and press and journalists and, young bloggers and as they used to be called, so on. Influential stylists, influential people who really care about young designers, which people do in the UK. Actually, it's what I find is when I ask someone to be on a panel, they actually love it, and afterwards they're like, God, I can't believe how incredible these people are. What we learned was that the money for New Gen, it rolls over 3 years if you get into it, this programme. We provide money for showing or for having a presentation. But much more important than that is that we now have panels of mentors available. Because I didn't hear anything this morning about mentoring, because, and I think that's actually the feedback you get from designers is from whatever prize that they've had all over the world, okay, the 500,000 euros was amazing, but it went in 2 seasons, and I'm still in the same place, and I wouldn't have made this mistake or that mistake. So we can, particularly with British educated young people, they have all the creativity. You can see how their products could, not just inspire on a catwalk, but could turn into a business. But they don't have any business training whatsoever. So quite shockingly, you can come out of an MA degree, and that could have taken you 7 years to get there, and still know nothing about intellectual property, and know nothing about how to work with buyers or not. And so we have, experts. We have an accountant. We have a lawyer, a law firm, which collaborates with us. So the designers get a certain number of pro bono hours with them. The first thing, which I don't know if there's anybody starting up their business here in this room, we would always say when somebody comes in for an interview is, have you registered your name in China? Because of the danger of IP squatters taking your name, and then I can talk to anybody after this about what that means, but it means that basically you can't trade in China because somebody else owns your name. And this is actually a phenomenon that actually we've realized has happened as soon as the schedule is published. People's names are registered by somebody in China. They don't want to copy your work. They just want to wait until you want to sell it into China, and then you can't because you are not. Okay, if Sarah Mower is registered in China, I'm no longer the real Sarah Mower. That entity is. So things like that are just the basic. It's expensive as well, but we try to put in early protection systems to enable designers also to ask questions, because I think when you're young, how do you? Well, I still don't know. You have to know what questions to ask. Lately, we've at the last round of New Gen, we invited Claire Bergkamp, she's ultimate guru in sustainability. She set up Stella McCartney's whole system with sustainability, and is now working for a non-profit. And she's mentoring the newest cohort. And what she said to all of them was, you have to know the right questions to ask before you can start. So, she recommended a sustainable fabric fair, which has grown and is huge now in London, but also, just to ask the questions about, traceability and so on. If you haven't had an education in it, and who has, basically, you have to know how to navigate. So, to have someone like Claire Bergkamp being able to chat with our young people, and what I've noticed is that the best people in fashion are kind and clever and generous, and often people ask me, how did you get that person? I said, well, I just asked. People often say yes.
That is really wonderful, because essentially what you are saying is that the designers are not just given the money to start a business, but they are accompanied on that journey by people who have experience, that mentoring, that friendship. What an incredible way of developing your network as well as a young designer.
Yes. And the other thing is, the danger is to, you never want to infantilize young designers and instruct them what to do, because people have formed their own networks. The other thing about the nature of British fashion education is that, because as I said, everybody is themselves, everyone's doing something different, and so you're not competing. So people help each other out. You know, if you don't know where to go to buy your buttons or I don't know, get zips or whatever, people will get something made up. People have helped one another because they're friends. They've been in college together, and that's a really healthy thing, which I don't see, which I haven't seen anywhere else. I've definitely not seen that in that kind of community which exists of friendship. I mean, obviously not everybody loves one another, but it's a phenomenon.
And you said that the designers get a financial package to start with. Where does that funding come from?
So the British Fashion Council is now a charity. It's a not-for-profit, and the participants in it are sponsors and patrons and industry bodies who donate. And there's a big philanthropic body of women actually who donate as well.
Are also big brands donors to New Gen?
Well, historically, this is something else I wanted to say about New Gen, and I think that I'm bringing this up because I think this could happen in Spain as well. A key turning point in the success and the visibility of New Gen was when Topshop came in, and we negotiated for them to sponsor a free catwalk for them, and because Topshop wanted to show its collection in London Fashion Week, we said no, because it wasn't. It was, God, we didn't even call it fast fashion then, high street fashion. We said, well, if you have a design team, and it's okay, but the contra deal is that we want you to give that venue to our young designers, and that started off quite a small way, and then it turned into something amazing because they, I suppose for international PR as well, they provided dinners, breakfast, drinks, hospitality, and it was such an amazing energy there. Something else. Another tip about how to create a good aura around what you're doing is hospitality, kindness, politeness. That's not often a feature of, because I'm a consumer of fashion shows. I go to shows all over the world. Sometimes you don't necessarily find a welcoming a welcome committee in other cities, capitals at shows. But we always wanted to make sure that English politeness and sense of humour and all these things, snacks, drinks, came into it. So that was a really amazing time in the late 2000s. Is it late 2000s up until about 2012 was the Olympics. Olympics was an amazing year. But as you know now, Topshop is no more.
That's right.
It failed. So things have been different since then.
So what is how does the relationship historically evolved between New Gen and London Fashion Week? Obviously, you talk about the Topshop days. And what is it like now? And what does it mean for Fashion Week as well, to have New Gen behind it?
Well, I mean, the BFC was formed to own the schedule of Fashion Week. That's it. That's where it started. Everything else has, as I said, grown organically. The mechanisms behind it. So it's always been about Fashion Week. They schedule it. I've never wanted anything to do with scheduling because of the politics involved in that. But I think what we've also had, we have an amazing woman called Anna Orsini, who's in charge of a hospitality program so that foreign press and buyers can be flown in. And simultaneously, I'm talking about around the time of this golden era I'm talking about, Christopher Bailey decided that Burberry should be repatriated to the UK because Burberry had been showing in Milan for a long time. He brought the Burberry show back to London, pitched this huge tent there, all the press and buyers had to come, and suddenly everybody was talking about Erdem and Christopher Kane and Simone Rocha, and I think they looked very, very professional. I mean, there are several elements to that, and it's another, tip. It's that they had the head to toe looks. They had milliners. They had, who would collaborate with them. Stephen Jones collaborated with them. Nicholas Kirkwood would do shoes for people, and amazing stylists in the UK. So they weren't looking like there was this huge exuberance, colour and print, and not the rebellious underground thing, amateur thing at all. Historically, simultaneously with that, if you're going back to 2000, the internet reporting started. I was then the sole reporter for Style.com, which is the precursor of Vogue.com, Vogue Runway, which I now write for. And at that time, what that meant was that all the designers who wanted previously to go to show in New York on their own, or Milan or Paris, try to get a space there, didn't have to anymore because they could be seen, their work could be seen on the same platform as Prada and Versace and Calvin Klein. So internet reporting came in. Not only that, actually thinking back on it, it's amazing things were happening. Net-a-Porter, Natalie Massenet started that internet business around 2000 from her bedroom. And before that, nobody believed that high fashion could be sold online, believe it or not, children. She invented online luxury selling, and then Matches fashion, Farfetch. They're all British. They're all British based. So this meant that those kids could start selling through the internet. Also, globalization was happening, and buyers from Bergdorf Goodman, Neiman Marcus, all the big boutiques were Barney's, competing to showcase and buy our young designers. So there was a level of professionalism which people were really surprised at, because I think there was this perception before. Obviously, Vivienne Westwood is wonderful, but in the 80s she was seen as like, really. It wasn't. She wasn't accepted as an amazing couturier she's known as now. It was underground. It was dangerous. It was scrappy. But this new generation was, not like that at all. And meanwhile, of course, Alexander McQueen had gone to Paris. He went to Paris, to Givenchy, and then he came back. That's right, came back, had his own house. And John Galliano had gone to Paris. Stella McCartney had gone to Paris. So, the influence of British designers, the populations of design studios all over the world still very much British accents. So the reputation of British fashion and Britain as a source of future talent, I think, is what we have, and it's still the talent pool that the industry worldwide drinks from.
Really interesting. Do you think that there is still a future for Fashion Week as we know it?
I'm questioning that. I am questioning that. I think the up and down a catwalk fashion show is usually the most boring thing in the world. It takes a lot for me to really be able to remember thousands of them. I think scenography, I think performance, everything to do with you know, now digital, say we talk about digital communication, it's people with phones. The experience, the immersive experience of being somewhere. I mean, it could be something, you know, extraordinary, like going to a castle in Puglia. It could be something like going to Seville next week with Dior. But it could also, as well, be somebody doing something that you've just literally never thought of before in a tiny room. And one of our new gen designers is called Stephen Stokey-Daly. He is a boy who went to Westminster University, graduated in 2020, just before the pandemic. And he's from Liverpool, a long way outside London, as you know, in the north of England. Went home, decided that he would start to try to sell his Oxford bags and shirts, which are made of curtain material and tablecloths. And he started Instagramming them and then selling them. And incredibly, his terms are, and this is something really important. He's learned that people will pay up front and wait for their delivery. So there were young men from Korea, from Australia, from America, from all over Europe, wanting his trousers and his shirts. So he started a business, and then suddenly Harry Styles' stylist, Harry Lambert, said that he wanted to take his clothes for Harry to wear, and suddenly Stephen's clothes were all over Harry Styles' Golden album video, and so this has been possible in the darkest times by one young individual being innovative and can do, and working with his grandmother, working with his mother and his boyfriend, sewing in their house in Liverpool, and sustaining it now by he's got orders from Matches and Essence. Essence are amazing retailer, and so I'm arcing back to what his presentation is like. This whole thing about being who you are. Stephen when he was at school, his drama teacher said you should join the National Youth Theatre. It's an amazing organisation for teenagers to act. And so he decided that he wanted to make his first show a play. And the play was about boys' experiences at school. And I went to the rehearsals. It was so amazing. He got the young men to talk about what their school experiences were like, whether it was they were from private school or from comprehensive schools, and they wrote the script themselves. And it was a really visceral, amazing performance. So I've talked about half an hour about him, I think. He's a contender in the LVMH prize. Also, he makes really good clothes. He cuts, well, they are, I won't say simple clothes, but they're really distinctive, and it's this thing of having a business where you will actually, where it's proven now that this new generation who want those clothes will pay up front, or they'll pay in installments. That makes it, that really changes the game, because many young designers in the past have fallen foul of retailers, where I think Carlo just outlined that. Oh, we'd love to take your clothes, and we'll pay you when they're bought. Nope, that doesn't work. What young designers have to know is that really you should be paid by a retailer 30% up front, so that you can finance your fabric buying and your production. So these are all things that we've learned.
That's a really interesting example of how things are changing.
Yeah.
And the consumer attitude to fashion is also changing.
These are young people.
Yeah. These are the future consumers. A must question: how is London Fashion Week funded?
How is London Fashion Week funded?
Yeah.
Well, as I told you, and yes, well, designers pay to be on the schedule. A fee to the British Fashion Council. Yeah, it's on a. I'm not in charge of this department, but it's on a. There's a roster of charges according to how new you are and how established you are, the size of business.
Okay. That's clear. A question that I wanted to ask you really about how your work connects with up-and-coming designers and what your perspective of this might be, because I think in your case might be different because you are truly committed to supporting new talent. But I don't think everyone that works in media or fashion magazines particularly sees that. Do you think that fashion magazines could do more to support emerging talent? Do you think that they end up always going back to the big players? You read Vogue magazine, it's always the same brands. Do you think that we need a commitment from them as well in terms of that work?
Well, I don't think you can fault Vogue for that. I mean, the woman I worked for, Anna Winters, when 9/11 happened, she started the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund for that very reason, to support young designers, and so it's been going since 9/11. What was it, 2001? Okay. And there are, I mean, there's a Vogue funded Spanish who's on next competition here, right? Is that right? Yep. I think, yeah. When I put on any event, Anna herself was always come and brought people and told people to come. So you might not see so many young designers in the pages, but behind the scenes, I think as a corporation, Condé Nast is very aware that we won't have a future unless we have young people in the industry. So,
okay, that's reassuring.
Well, that's the way I feel anyway.
Let's move on and talk about.
Well, what I do think, though, is that newspapers don't take any role.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did feel for a while, have I crossed the line? Because, well, I mean, many journalists all over just see people at a distance and don't. A very cold kind of fashion journalism in terms of just whether you like that style or not. And don't actually go behind to actually, offer any advice. And I think, in as much as journalists are relevant anymore, they could do more.
We talked briefly earlier about some of the graduates that come from the numerous really fantastic universities we've got in the UK. I think we are very lucky in the UK.
Yeah.
The creative and design education is definitely nurtured and appreciated, although we probably would like it to be appreciated even more.
Yeah.
But how does British Fashion Council support the development of skills, and how important is it to be connected to the education stage of those young designers?
Yes, well, there was a point at which a horrible thing happened politically with university fees. I mean, historically, my generation, I was actually paid to go to university because my parents were teachers. They didn't have couldn't pay for me to go to university, but. Further education was free up until, was it up until about 1999? No, maybe early 90s. And then the government sort of started sneaking in small fees, and then when there was a coalition government between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, Lib Dems having got in promising not to raise student fees, tripled them. With the Conservatives, they went overnight from £3,000 to £9,000 a year. at that point, being enraged by this, thinking, very seriously that the talent assets we have talent is not distributed by money, by wealth, by background. Talent is talent, and so the most important thing is to have talent from everywhere, having access to further education. So we started a scholarship foundation, and I am very proud to say that we now have 21 students who are going through BA and MA who wouldn't be able to go to university or wouldn't be able to finish their degrees because they'd have to drop out, not being able to afford their collections. So, this is what we do. This is what we do. I'm really, really proud of that.
Yeah, congratulations. I think that's phenomenal that you are able to support students like that, and I think really translate that ambition into action.
This is something that Spain could do too. I think that also, because I don't just when I travel, I just love to go to people's studios and talk to students and actually parents often come to me and say, where should I send my child? And I always say, well, follow the teachers. Not every brilliant teacher is in Central St. Martin's. In fact, and Central St. Martin's is now, frankly, quite a very overcrowded university, isn't it? There are places that Demna Gvasalia, for instance, he wanted to go to Central St. Martin's, he couldn't afford it. So he said he went to Antwerp Academy, amazing, which is very, very inexpensive. I mean, there are, and he happened to have the most incredible teacher in Linda Loper, who's now at Polymoda. Linda had taught Margella, Dries, and Mühlemeister, the Antwerp Six. So he was the last of her students. How amazing is that? But it was a cheaper place to study. So I think now, I think that perhaps the Spanish government might see that people should have bursaries to go and study abroad. Maybe there'd be conditions, come back home afterwards and work, do a contra deal, work in some way with craftspeople or something. There could be schemes like that. And also, I think, in the contrary-wise, Linda Loper, as an example, the amazing Belgian retailer, guru, and goddess, is now living in Florence because she's teaching in Polymoda because she wanted to go and live in Florence. I see lots of examples of great teachers wanting to move to have a nicer life somewhere. So I think maybe also Spanish universities could work on exchanges. I don't know. The academic to and fro is really important and really healthy.
This is really interesting. And as you speak, I'm thinking about Brexit. And I'm thinking about the impact that Brexit has had on British designers, but I'm actually thinking about the impact that it's going to have on the recruitment of European students going to study in the UK as well.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. Brutal fact is that European students who used to be able to come and study in the UK, in every university at the same fee rate as British ones, i.e. £9,000 a year, are now being charged for what's called international fees. Which, what are they?
About 15,000 a year.
So there are fewer European students being recruited. It's a tragedy.
Yeah, but again, this is an opportunity for some of the amazing Spanish universities to up the game.
Yeah, and I think the game really does have to be upped. This is probably not going to... sometimes I'm not diplomatic. I was speaking to another incredibly talented young designer who I won't mention, who's Spanish. They said that they're really eager to recruit Spanish talent from universities, and said it was impossible because the research methodology wasn't there. The education was very basic, people turning up with pictures of influencers and pictures from Pinterest, and no ability to think creatively. So I think maybe perhaps that will change. I know Ernesto and some of his friends are teaching now. So the skills and the culture of Central St. Martin's is already being seeded in Madrid. But I guess the new generation does think that the Kardashians are the be all and end all. And if so, well, I mean, they should don't be in fashion.
In terms of what new designers need to be addressing, considering, and the many changes that we have seen socially, if we think about fashion as key for social transformation and expression. We have the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter. We've got the tremendous acceleration of digitalization, globalization, internationalization. How is this affecting young entrepreneurs? And are there any other areas that need to become considered or prioritized?
Well, in the weeks after the George Floyd murder, student discontent, I'm just going to focus on the impact on students. I'm sure you can tell me more about this, but the outrage very, very soon became directed towards the university and the ways of teaching, the demand for decolonizing the curriculum. I mean, the libraries, just, very, very Western-centric. Teachers mostly white. This was also suddenly a real challenge to the university, the UAL. Can you tell me more about that? You were
absolutely. There. I think you are absolutely spot on. I think that there's been a demand to create new narratives around the storytelling that creativity brings, and bring about the voices of the unheard, and those countries, particularly in the UK, with the connection to the Commonwealth. We are the Commonwealth, but we are the Commonwealth due to the British Empire. That was not a nice part of history. We want to hear why, how, and there needs to be representation. I think representation is fundamental.
Well, also teaching. One thing that happened was that I know an amazing black educator called Andrew Ibby, who is at Liverpool University, somewhere really good to study. Got in touch with an incredible academic called Pascal Matthias in Southampton University. They sort of they connected through my Instagram because I was posting things. They didn't know each other, but anyway, since then, an organisation called Fashion Academics Creating Equality has been formed nationally of people of colour who are academics and teaching, and a lot has come out about how universities have very, very few black professors in the country, full stop, but especially not in fashion education, and also how staff of colour tend to be part-time. They don't get the professorships and so on. And anyway, so they are changing a lot. They're also conducting a nationwide survey on student satisfaction. There is already a student satisfaction index, which everyone can read when they're applying for university, what the students think, and of course, yeah, you can make your decisions on that. However, there have been no questions in that survey about whether you felt that you were treated equally, for who you are, for your racial background, or for, do you have a disability? None of that goes into it. But now, so it's been revealed that there's, the facts of how excluded, how many, microaggressions are commonplace. And this goes for, for the Chinese and Korean students, and, so these things are being very much looked at, and they have to change. As far as diversity, I really don't like that term, but as you picking up on what you've just described as our colonial history. In fact, now we have, I'm really proud to say this, an incredible cohort of new gen designers whose heritages are they are British. They are actually born in London or wherever, have parents who are Jamaican or and Nigerians, from Sierra Leone, from Ghana, and people such as Grace Wells Bonner, whose father's Jamaican, mother English, Nicholas Daly, who's Jamaican Scottish, a guy called Fode, who has a new brand called Labrum, who's between Sierra Leone and London. Saul Nash, whose parents are Guyanese and Barbadian. This is, and what's really special about all of these designers is that their work talks about who they are and where they're from. And once younger people see that, they think, well, I can be in fashion too. And the people they employ are from communities that perhaps never thought they could get into fashion. I mean, a lot of the time, actually, though, parents don't want their children to be in fashion. They want them to be doctors and accountants, which you can understand. A lot of kids have to rebel from, especially African and Indian and Pakistani, Bangladeshi backgrounds. So, but this is happening in London, and I don't see it. Well, in New York, yes, it's like that, but. In London, these people, this whole cohort are the force now.
Mm-hmm. I guess that that imperial past is common to Spain as well, and the connection with Latin America. And there is certainly an opportunity to connect with some of that First Nations culture and tradition and craft as well. And not only revitalize it, but create new narratives around that. So we'll let Acme do that. We're getting to the end of our hour, and I wanted to ask a couple more questions. And if you were able to reflect on your 25, 30-year journey and start afresh with what you know now, what would you do differently? And which are the key lessons that you feel were absolutely key that maybe you didn't recognize straight away?
I got over my shyness. that was the most important thing. I mean, when you're young, you're scared. You don't know how to talk to people, and I think. Sorry, what would I do differently? Mm-hmm. Maybe I'd have done that earlier to take responsibility, but I mean, nobody does take you seriously when you're very young. I think I realised when I had lots of contacts and experience that I should use them to help. It sounds like I'm some kind of nun or saint, but no, I enjoy it. If The biggest regret is not being able to stop Brexit. I just want everybody here to know that 48% of the British population voted to stay in Europe. And I and many of my friends and young people were on every single march as the terrible day drew near against leaving the European Union. And also, as a fact, the British Fashion Council, in between the result of the referendum, it must have been in the run-up to the referendum, polled their members, and 90% of people in the fashion industry did not want to leave Europe, and the rest didn't know what they were voting for because nobody did know what they were voting for. It was an absolute... sorry, I'm showing my pain. And I really, really apologise, and I'm embarrassed for our government. And I can't even imagine what you think of us. But ever hopeful, I do believe in people. Let's hope that there'll be a time when please, would you have us back?
And lastly, Sarah, mentoring, supporting new designers.
Yeah.
Would you come and support Spanish efforts?
Of course, absolutely, definitely. And I'm going to turn up at anything that. One thing I wanted to say also, just chatting to Vanessa and other young Spanish designers, to get things off the ground, you have to do it yourself. Just get a few good people in the room and decide, we're going to go and have, as we did, go to Paris, have a one-stop shop so buyers and press can come, serve some food, and talk. Learn how to talk about your collection to people. I mean, this selling is really tough. Mm-hmm. If you're in a showroom on your own and no one's there, no one's coming, it's hard. And even if there's a group of you together, it's hard because there are times when people don't come. But being able to rehearse your speech about your own brand, who you are, how you make things as well. I'm talking about craft. Buyers and press really want to know this now. I really believe in human relationships and the fun and the uplifting part of it as well. So
lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was wonderful. So we've got a little bit of time for questions.
Ooh.
Thank you very much, both. Sarah, as an Spaniard living in London, we feel very welcome there. So I echo your reflections. But I had two questions for you. One is, could you give us a bit more detail on the fundraising initiatives that the VFC undertakes, such as the Fashion Trust, the British Fashion Awards? What are those elements that we could pull to get people excited and investing in Spanish fashion?
There's an amazing woman called Tanya Farrows, who's the head of the Fashion Trust, who lives partly in London and is from Lebanon, who has brought a circle of women in business and wealthy patrons who donate. Other fundraising. Oh, sorry, my throat's going now. Actually, the Fashion Awards that we have. It's annual, as you know, held at the Royal Albert Hall, and this is a vision of Natalie Massenet that it should be the Fashion Awards, not the British Fashion Awards, the Fashion Awards. So, in fact, brands Dior, Balenciaga, Gucci, Harrods, all the brands of the world and retailers take tables, and actually, believe it or not, that is an income stream as well. And there's sponsorship from, we have ClearPay, TikTok, and so on.
Sarah, in your Vogue reviews, many times you reference Spanish culture. I have very present one that got a big impression on me, which was the Spring-Summer 20 Loewe collection, where you mentioned Spanish silhouette colors. Even you mentioned Goya, Velázquez. So my question is, what?
Oh, you're going to quote me?
No. My question is, understanding that you have a deep knowledge of Spanish culture, what is your advice for Spanish designers to use this identity element and work for Spanish fashion positioning in the world?
That is a fascinating question, because I think you should do what feels natural to you and what you feel passionate about. I mean, there's no point in copying Cristobal just because you're Spanish. I think, however, the ability to introduce so many levels of Spanish culture to the outside world is really important part of storytelling. Actually, the first designer that I knew who was Spanish was Oscar de la Renta. I wrote a book with him, for him. And I sat down for many, many weeks with him telling me about working for Balenciaga and his days in Madrid, his young life here, the fiestas, the whole culture, absolutely spellbound. And I do think that's such a massive asset. If you, from the British point of view, Spain has been seen as a place where you can get a cheap holiday. This has been the British attitude, Ibiza, Marbella, Majorca, Magaluf, oh God, and of course Barcelona, Ibiza, party. But most people don't know anything, and I definitely don't know enough about the deep culture of Spain. And I think surely there are references that should be embedded in people's work, and also the use of crafts, which is incredibly important to, and will be fascinating to from a press point of view. I don't know if that's an answer.
Lovely, thank you. We had a question over here as well, this lady.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you very much for your speech. I enjoyed really much your experience.
Thank you.
Actually, my question is about, I'm not Spanish. I'm working here to find the Spanish companies, that they produce for cheaper price but higher quality than Portugal. I actually lived in Italy and after in Los Angeles, and I found out that they have great database of companies and coordinations between companies, and it's really easy to find producers, suppliers, and
in Spain or in Italy? Sorry,
in Italy and also in United States. In United States, they can find easily by CFDA, as you mentioned before.
Right.
And Avinter created such a great database for designers that they are 3% of the community, but about 90% of the community are the producers, back-end developers, and everything that they are doing factories, finding factories or suppliers for materials. They are really important. Spain doesn't have this, unfortunately. I have to confess that this is
okay. Whose responsibility in this room is it to start that?
I was going to ask you this question.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know. I can't answer it on behalf of Spain.
No, I'm going to ask you about UK. How did you find the possibility to connect and make a database for your from designers, suppliers, producers, everybody that they are working together? Because you thought at the beginning that there are some people that are kind and they share the experience with others. But this is kind of a little bit more old school. I'm sorry that I tell it, but right now
I mean, again, it's work that needs to be done. I mean, the next wave is connecting designers with manufacturers, with mills. They're amazing British mills, which still exist at a very, very high end. And I don't know that young designers are connected with them. I mean, I'm sorry, we have a lot of problems with Brexit, obviously. It makes it much more important that everything is reshored anyway for sustainability reasons. There's a vision of the British Fashion Council to make the UK the leading centre of circular design. So it's a whole different idea of, recycling. Fabric might, we hope, come to fruition. But as far as database, I don't know. It's probably, I mean, the fact is that up until now, and still, designers rely on Italian suppliers, which is a lot more expensive for them now. So, yeah.
Are there any more questions for Sarah? Doesn't look like it. Well, in that case, Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing your experience and your knowledge with all of us. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.